Tonight, we glide beneath an endless blue sky. This is not the sky you see from your window. Take note. The boundless, infinite blue stretching over the ancient steppes of Central Asia, where the wind carries whispers older than humanity. This is the land of Tengri, the sky god, the power that holds the worlds together. Let the weariness of the day wash over you. Lean back and let us begin. Before going too far, may these ancient Turkish tales bring you peace in the quiet hours of the night. And, if you wish, let's meet in the comments and find out where you are listening from tonight. The steppes are boundless, and all listeners gather from distant lands. May Tengri protect you. Close your eyes and imagine, with your permission, an ancient world before cities, before borders. Long before the settled life that now confines us to four walls and under roofs. Instead, imagine an endless green plain, rolling in waves under winds that blow from horizon to horizon, uninterrupted, eternal, free. The steppes of Central Asia, the endless plains of Kazakhstan, Mongolia, Siberia, lands stretching as far as the eye can see, so vast that walking from one end to the other would take months. Here, in this boundless expanse, nomadic peoples roamed on horseback. They herded flocks of sheep. They pitched felt tents, then took them down, following the wind. And every night they would sit cross-legged around their fires, gazing upward at that infinite blue. The sky, the heavens, not just a color, but also an entity, a power, a god. Tengri. Tengri. The name itself means sky in the ancient Turkic language. Not just any sky, mind you, but the eternal, unchanging dome that watches over all creation without beginning or end, only existence. That was Tengri. The ancient Turks did not build temples for him. They did not carve his image in stone. How could you fit infinity into stone or marble? How could you grasp the sky itself? You cannot. Nor is there any need to. Because Tengri is always everywhere above your head, from dawn to dusk, from summer to winter, from the womb to the grave. Ancient texts, stone inscriptions, shamanic chants all say the same thing. Tengri is on high. Tengri watches over everything. Tengri knows everything. And, most importantly, Tengri never forgets. So, what kind of being was Tengri? If you try to imagine him, don't expect an anthropomorphic figure, not an old man with a beard, not a king sitting on a throne. Tengri was formless. He had no shape. He was pure existence. He was the sky itself, the blue, the space, the infinity. Some accounts describe him as light, some as breath, some as silence. Because Tengri was indescribable. He could only be felt. Like the wind gently caressing your cheek. Like the sun revitalizing your skin. Like the moonlight rising at night guiding your way. The ancient Turks did not pray to Tengri in the modern sense. They did not bargain with him. They did not beg him. Instead, they absorbed him. They internalized him. They spoke of him with respect. Because Tengri was inevitable like the blue sky dome, like every breath we take, like time that does not listen. Origins and creation. Where and how did Tengri come into being? This question, as in all creation mythologies, is fraught with uncertainty. Because what existed before Tengri? A vast nothingness? The reign of chaos? Or something else? Some stories tell us this. In the beginning, there was only an endless ocean water. Water everywhere. Above, below, in every direction. And within this water, Tengri slept. Or perhaps he was awake but motionless. In a state where time had not yet begun, where space was waiting to come into being. Then, suddenly, or perhaps slowly, no one knows for sure, Tengri moved. He breathed. And with that breath, the sky and the earth separated, blue rose upward. brown sank downward, and between them, space, air, the realm of life, was formed. The sky became Tengri, or Tengri became the sky. They were one and the same. They could not be distinguished from each other. The earth, in some accounts, is called Yersu, earth-water, the material world, the world beneath Tengri, carried by him but separate from him. Yersu was a living entity in its own right, but it could not exist without Tengri, because Tengri kept it in existence every moment, every second, just as the sky envelops the earth. And Tengri was not alone, because with creation, other beings also came into being: spirits, powers, those with evil intentions, those with good intentions, those who were neutral. One of the most important of these was Erlik, the Lord of Evil, a fallen spirit, the ruler of the underworld. Some say Erlik was Tengri's twin brother. Some say he was an angel who fell from the sky. Others say Erlik was as old as Tengri, but completely opposite to him. Life and death, fire and water, creation and destruction. The story continues. When Tengri decided to create the world, he realized he could not do it alone. The material world needed material power, and so Erlik was summoned. Or perhaps Erlik was already there, waiting for the right moment. Tengri said to Erlik, "Dive to the bottom of the ocean. There is mud there. Bring me that mud. I will create the earth from it." Erlik dived into the dark depths of the waters where no light could reach. And there, at the very bottom of the water, he found the mud, black, slippery, shapeless mud. He took it in his hands, held it in his mouth, and hid it, and he rose to the surface. But Erlik was overly greedy. He thought to himself, "If this mud can create a world, then I can create my own world. I don't need Tengri." And he tried to hide the mud from Tengri in his hands, in his mouth, on his body. But the mud began to grow. It swelled. It expanded. Erlik was about to drown. He couldn't take it any more, and spat out the mud Tengri was waiting for this moment. He knew it from the beginning. He saw everything because he was the sky. And he took the mud Erlik had spat out, and blew on it. And with that breath the earth was formed. Mountains rose, valleys sank, rivers flowed, forests grew. At that moment the world was born. Still, Erlik's betrayal was never forgotten. Tengri said to him, "You did not side with the light. Therefore you will remain in darkness forever." And Erlik was imprisoned in the underworld, the realm of the dead. The kingdom of shadows, Tamag, was sent to him. It became Erlik's new home forever. But even there, Erlik was powerful, and he was making plans. He was waiting for his time to come, because every creation must have an end, and every end would belong to Erlik, the qualities of Tengri. So, what did Tengri do after creating life? Did he fall silent? Did he leave the world to its own devices? No. Tengri was always there. He watched everything. He did not intervene in everything, but he was conscious, and he was aware of everything. According to the beliefs of the ancient Turks, Tengri had certain unique characteristics. All of these were quite different from the concept of God in modern religions, yet he was still divine, sacred, all-powerful. First, Tengri was just not blind justice, however, not mechanical justice. Tengri could discern people's true intentions. He read their hearts. A man might appear good on the outside, but his heart could be filled with hatred. Tengri knew this. A woman might make a grave mistake, but her heart could be pure. Tengri knew this too. And Tengri's justice did not reach us in the form of reward and punishment. At least, it did not happen instantly. Sometimes it would take a lifetime. sometimes generations. Ultimately, balance would be restored. Because Tengri was the master of time, he was in no hurry. Second, Tengri did not take sides. No community, no kingdom, no person was his favorite. Tengri was equally distant from everyone. The sky god covered everyone equally, rich or poor, strong or weak. Everyone lived under Tengri. Everyone breathed with his permission. This influenced the worldview of the ancient Turks. Because if Tengri was impartial, then the caste system could not exist. Divine kingship could not reign. No one could be born sacred. Everyone was equal in Tengri's eyes. Of course, there were leaders in the world, khans, khagans, chieftains. Indeed, their power came not from Tengri, but from their abilities, their courage, their intelligence. And if they were bad leaders, Tengri would punish them. How? By removing them from the throne, by defeating them in battle, by alienating their communities from them, because Tengri's favor was called kut in Turkish. Kut meant divine favor, luck. If a leader had kut, he would be successful, but if he lost his kut, he would fall, and kut was given by Tengri and taken away by Tengri. Third, Tengri never spoke to anyone, that is, audibly. Thunder was not Tengri's voice. The wind was not Tengri's whisper. Tengri was silent. Yet this did not mean he did not communicate with us. Tengri communicated through signs, natural events, animal movements, dreams, coincidences. The ancient Turks saw the world as Tengri's book. Everything carried a message from him, if you knew how to read it. And those who knew how to read were the shamans, the Khams. They were the intermediaries between Tengri and the world, but we will return to this subject later. For now, think about Tengri's silence, how powerful silence is, how deep as the infinite sky. Fourth, Tengri did not change. The seasons changed, empires rose and fell. People were born and died. But Tengri remained the same, always, forever. The sky was blue every morning. It was black every night, and the stars shone in their places for centuries. This stable immutability gave the ancient Turks confidence. Because the world was chaotic wars, famines, diseases. On the other hand, Tengri did not change. Tengri was reliable. Tengri was like a rock, like a mountain, but even more stable because even rocks wear away over time. But the sky remains the sky forever. Tengri and Nature. Tengri was not merely a sky god. That is, he was not just a passive entity residing above. Tengri was nature itself. Or nature was a reflection of Tengri. The two were intertwined. Nomadic Turks viewed nature as sacred, but not in a pantheistic sense. That is, there was no separate god for every tree or every stone. Instead, everything had a spirit, and these spirits reflected Tengri's presence. Take mountains, for example. High mountains were the places closest to the sky. Therefore, they were sacred. The ancient Turks performed important ceremonies on mountain tops. There, they felt closer to Tengri. There, their prayers were better heard. Otlug Khan Mountain, the Altai Mountains, the Tian Shan Mountains, all were named with this understanding: they were Tengri's dwellings, or at least they were the gates to Tengri. Rivers were also sacred, because water meant life, and life was Tengri's gift to living beings. The ancient Turks performed rituals of pouring water into the river, as a sign of gratitude, or as a request. In times of drought, they prayed for rain, and when the rain came, they saw it as a blessing bestowed by Tengri. Fire was one of the most sacred elements. Because fire came from the sky, lightning was Tengri's weapon. The sun was Tengri's eye, and the fire lit by humans was only a small reflection of that divine fire. The ancient Turks treated fire with great respect. One did not spit on fire. One did not throw filth on fire. Before the fire went out, prayers were said, because extinguishing the fire was like killing a small piece of Tengri and the wind. The wind was Tengri's breath. On the steps, the wind never stopped. Sometimes it was light, a whisper. Sometimes it was fierce, a scream, but it was always there. And the ancient Turks listened to the wind. Because the wind carried messages from Tengri. It carried knowledge, it carried spirits. The dead were carried by the wind to Tengri, or to Erlik's realm. In any case, the wind was a mediator. Animals, too, were Tengri's creation. Many animals carried special meanings. The horse, for example. The horse was the most valuable animal to the Turks. Because the horse meant freedom, it meant speed, it meant power. A Turk warrior was one with his horse, and a warrior whose horse died took his horse with him. To the other world, the wolf was another special animal. The wolf was the symbol of the Turks. The legend of Asena tells of the wolf's sacred role. But that story is for another night. For now, all you need to know is this. The wolf was Tengri's messenger. Or at least, that's how it was seen. The eagle was the same. The eagle was the animal that flew in the sky, reaching the highest heights. It was closest to Tengri. Shamans took the form of eagles on their spiritual journeys, because only the eagle could see the secrets of the sky, Tengri, and humans. So how did Tengri view humans? Did he love them? Did he hate them? Or did he ignore them? The answer is complex. Because Tengri did not possess anthropomorphic emotions. Love, hate, anger, joy, these were human emotions. Tengri was far beyond these. However, Tengri valued humans. He had created them. He had given them a place to live. He had given them free will. And he judged their actions fairly. According to the ancient Turks, every human was a part of Tengri's spirit. When they were born, Tengri breathed a spirit into them, and when they died, the spirit returned to Tengri. Those who did evil throughout their lives fell into the hands of Erlik. This belief led to some interesting consequences. For example, suicide was a great sin, because life was a gift from Tengri, and to reject this gift was considered a great disrespect to Tengri. Those who committed suicide were sent to Tamag, the underworld, and there they were subjected to eternal torment. Murder was very similar. Taking someone's life was stealing from Tengri, and this crime was definitely punished, sometimes in this world, sometimes in the next, but justice would prevail one way or another. But Tengri could also be merciful. If a person made a mistake, repented, and tried to make amends, Tengri would not remain silent. Repentance was a powerful thing because repentance showed that a person's heart was pure. And the heart, according to the ancient Turks, was the home of the soul. Not the brain, but the heart, because the heart was connected to emotions. And emotions were Tengri's language. How did people worship Tengri? We said there were no temples, there were no priests either, there was no systematic religion. So how did it work? The answer was simple. By repaying the debt Tengri had given them by living a good life, by living honestly, by overcoming their fears and living courageously, by being generous. These were the things Tengri wanted. On the other hand, there were also certain rituals. On special days, at full moon, at solstices, communities would gather. They would light a fire, they would drink mare's milk or kumis. They would sing songs, they would dance, and they would call out to Tengri. Tengri we see you. You are as high as the sky. Do not forget us. Do not withdraw your grace from us. Protect our women. Protect our children. Keep us safe from our enemies. Simple prayers, unpretentious but sincere. Because the ancient Turks knew that Tengri looked not for show, but for sincerity, Erlik and opposites now, to truly understand Tengri, we must also understand his opposite, Erlik, ruler of the underworld. If Tengri was light, Erlik was shadow. If Tengri was above, Erlik was below. If Tengri created, Erlik destroyed. But be careful. Erlik is not an evil spirit. He is not a devil in the modern sense. Erlik is a more complex character than that. In some ways, he is necessary, because without light there can be no shadow, and without shadow the value of light would be incomprehensible. Erlik's origins are disputed. In some stories, Erlik is Tengri's brother. Together they completed creation. Tengri created the sky, Erlik created the underworld, a balance, a harmony. Some stories say that Erlik is a fallen angel. He was once at Tengri's side. Perhaps he was even as powerful as Tengri, but he paid the price for his pride. Because Erlik wanted to create things on his own. He did not want to be united with Tengri, and this rebellion caused his fall. The story begins, as we mentioned earlier, with the ocean and mud. Tengri asks Erlik to bring him mud. Erlik brings it, but keeps some for himself. He thinks he can create his own world, but the mud grows. Erlik drowns, and he spits out the mud. Tengri takes the mud, blows on it, and thus the world is formed. Tengri says to Erlik, "You betrayed me, you showed greed, you showed selfishness. Therefore, your place is not in the light, but in the darkness." And Erlik is sent to Tamag, the underworld, the realm of the dead. What kind of place is Tamag? According to ancient Turkic beliefs, Tamag consists of 7 or 9 layers. Each layer is darker than the one before, colder, more painful. The first layer is relatively lighter. There, those who committed minor sins are found liars, thieves, the lazy. Their punishment is tedium. It consists of the same repetitive, boring tasks for eternity. Empty days, no pain, no pleasure. A vast emptiness. The second layer is a little worse. There, those who commit violence are found. Fighters, those who harm others. Their punishment is pain. They are constantly wounded, but never die. Because there is no death in Tamag. There is only endless, perpetual suffering. The third layer is even worse: murderers, rapists, traitors. Their punishment is torture. Erlik's demons tear them apart, then reassemble them, and tear them apart again, an endless cycle. And so it continues, each layer deeper, darker, more horrific. The lowest layer is the worst. There, Erlik himself sits on a throne made of bones, surrounded by his most loyal demons, and before him the worst souls, those who committed suicide, child murderers, those who betrayed their own families. Their punishment is Erlik's direct concern, and Erlik's concern is the most terrifying thing that can happen to them. Because Erlik takes pleasure in pain, he understands pain, he perfects pain. But Erlik is not just a mechanism of punishment. Erlik is also death itself. Every living being will eventually die, and when it dies, Erlik will be there. The ancient Turks did not fear death because death is natural, but they feared Erlik. Because Erlik can call you before you deserve it, or he can send you to the wrong place. That is why shamans were important, because shamans could bargain with Erlik. But we will come to that in a moment. Erlik's servant Erlik was not alone in Tamag. Countless beings were under his command. These were demons, jinn, guardians, evil spirits. Whatever you want to call them in Turkish, they are known by names such as Albaste, Chor, Yek, and Shaitan. Albaste, for example. This entity appears in the form of a woman beautiful, seductive, but deadly. Albaste roams at night. She finds sleeping men, and she sucks their souls. In the morning, the man is sometimes found dead, sometimes sick, exhausted, detached from life. To protect themselves from Albaste, the ancient Turks used various talismans. Iron kept evil spirits away. A knife, an arrowhead, a horseshoe. These were placed beside the bed, and when Albaste saw the iron, it would retreat. Chor, on the other hand, is another entity. Chor brings illness, especially to children. According to the ancient Turks, if a child fell ill, Chor had probably visited them. And to drive away the Chor, a shaman was called. The shaman performed rituals. He played the drum, he danced, he entered a trance, and he went to the spiritual world. There he found the Chor and he fought it. Sometimes he won and the child recovered. Sometimes he lost and the child died. Yek, on the other hand, is a more general term. Yek is any evil spirit. Some are weak, some are strong, some are mischievous, some are deadly. But all of them serve Erlik, and Erlik uses them to punish people. Or just for fun, because Erlik, according to some legends, has evil intentions. He takes pleasure in people's suffering, he watches them fall, and laughs. But other accounts say that Erlik is merely doing his duty. Erlik is the master of death, and death is necessary, because without death the cycle of life cannot be completed. New generations cannot come. If the old generations remain forever, the world will stop. So is Erlik evil? Is he good? Or is his existence simply necessary? The answer depends on your perspective. On the other hand, the ancient Turks respected Erlik. It was a respect mixed with fear, because you don't want to cross Erlik, but you can't completely ignore him either. Tengri and Erlik. Balance. Tengri and Erlik are opposites, but at the same time they are complementary. Without one, the other is meaningless on its own. This is the essence of ancient Turkic cosmology. Think about it. If there were only Tengri, only light, only good, only creation, what kind of place would the world be? Static, monotonous, perfect, but motionless. Because change arises from opposition. Movement comes from tension, and life comes from struggle. Erlik sustains this struggle. Erlik tests people. He brings hardship. He brings pain. And this pain strengthens people, or it breaks them. Both are part of life. Tengri alone could not be cruel, because if Tengri were only good, where would evil come from? But Erlik's existence eliminates this problem. Evil comes from Erlik, and Tengri allows Erlik to exist, because Tengri knows that balance is necessary. Ancient Turkic poets described this balance as follows: Heaven and earth stand together. Without one, the other falls. Light and darkness dance in harmony. Without one, the other cannot exist. This philosophical approach deeply influenced the worldview of the ancient Turks. They did not believe in absolute good or absolute evil. Instead, they accepted shades of gray. Good people could do bad things. Bad people could do good things. And everything depended on context. This approach allowed for moral flexibility, but it also demanded responsibility, because every action brought certain consequences, and Tengri judged those consequences. Shamans, the bridge between Tengri and Erlik. Now, let's talk about shamans, because shamans were the most important part of the Tengri faith. They were the intermediaries between the visible world and the invisible world. A shaman was called a kam in Turkish. A kam was a chosen person. Not everyone could become a shaman. Shamanism was both an innate talent and required extensive training. How did a child know they would become a shaman? Usually, there were signs the child would have strange dreams. They would understand animal languages. They would experience illnesses but recover. Sometimes they would have epileptic-like seizures. These were seen as a call from the spiritual world. The family would take the child to an elderly shaman. The shaman would evaluate the child, and if they truly had the talent, they would take them on as a student. The training lasted for years, sometimes 10 years, sometimes more. The child learned songs. He learned rituals. He learned about medicinal plants, but most importantly, he learned to make spiritual journeys. Spiritual journeys are the heart of shamanism. The shaman leaves his body behind. His spirit goes to other worlds, upwards to the realm of Tengri, or down to the realm of Erlik. There he speaks with spirits. He gains knowledge, he negotiates. For example, when someone was sick, the shaman would be called. The shaman would first make a diagnosis. He would examine the sick person's spirit. Perhaps the spirit had left the body, or perhaps an evil spirit had taken over the body. If the spirit had separated, the shaman had to bring it back. He would go on a spiritual journey. He would go to Tamag. There he would find the spirit's location, and he would bargain with Erlik. Erlik, the shaman would say, "This spirit does not belong to you yet. This person's time has not yet come. Let him go, and I will give you another spirit." And the shaman would offer a sacrifice, perhaps a horse, perhaps a goat. Erlik considers the offer, and sometimes he accepts it. The spirit is released. The shaman brings it back, and the sick person recovers. But sometimes Erlik refuses. He says, "No, this spirit is mine. Its time is up. Leave here." And the shaman returns empty-handed. The sick person is surrendered to Erlik. This is the dangerous side of shamanism, because when the shaman goes to Erlik's realm, he himself is in danger. Sometimes shamans could not return. Their souls would be lost in Tamag. Their bodies would be left soulless. That is why shamans were greatly respected, because they took great risks for the community. Shamanic rituals. Shamanic rituals were spectacular and mystical. The community would gather in a tent or in an open area. A fire would be lit and the shaman would prepare. The shaman wore special clothing. This clothing was made of bird feathers, animal skins, and metal bells. Each piece had a meaning. The feathers represented the sky. The skins represented the earth. The bells were used to summon spirits. The shaman would play his drum. The drum was the shaman's horse. On the spiritual journey, the sound of the drum carried the shaman. The rhythm started slowly. Then it sped up. Then it sped up even more, monotonous, hypnotic, trance-inducing. The shaman danced. He spun round and round. He leapt. He trembled. And the community watched. Silently, respectfully, sometimes fearfully. The shaman sang unintelligible words, because these were not in human language. They were in the language of spirits, the language of Tengri, the language of Erlik, the language of animals. And then, suddenly, the shaman would fall to the ground, motionless, eyes open but empty, breathing slowly, pulse weak. The community knew that the shaman was not here now. His spirit had gone on a journey. Sometimes it lasted minutes, sometimes hours, sometimes all night. And the community waited, around the fire, silently. Finally, the shaman would move a groan, a tremor. His eyes would focus, and the shaman would return. His first words contained knowledge. "I found the spirit," or "Erlik rejected the offer," or "Tengri sent a message," and the community listened. because the shaman had seen the unseen. He knew the unknowable. Tengri's messages. Tengri did not speak aloud, but he sent messages, and the shamans interpreted these messages. The messages came in various forms. Dreams were the most common. The ancient Turks attached great importance to dreams, because dreams were considered Tengri's window. If a person ascended to the sky in their dream, it was a good sign. Tengri's favor was upon them. If they fell in their dream, it was a bad sign. Perhaps danger was near. Perhaps Erlik was watching them. If they saw animals in their dream, it was also meaningful. A white horse meant luck. A black wolf meant danger. An eagle meant greatness. A snake meant betrayal. But dreams could be complex. Every detail mattered. Color, direction, time, weather, and the shaman would evaluate all these details. Then he would make an interpretation. Natural events were also messages. Thunder could be Tengri's wrath or just a warning. Be careful, a change is coming. Lightning was a special event. A place struck by lightning was considered sacred. Because Tengri had touched it, the ancient Turks would take pieces from trees struck by lightning. These became powerful talismans. A shooting star was the journey of a soul. Perhaps a death was coming soon, or a birth. According to the ancient Turks, the stars were the home of souls, and if a star fell, a soul was moving. A solar eclipse was the most terrifying sign, because the sun was Tengri's eye, and if the sun darkened, Tengri was closing, or Erlik was closing Tengri. In either case, something bad would happen. The ancient Turks performed rituals during the eclipse, they shouted. They beat drums to call the sun back. And when the eclipse ended, they relaxed. Tengri was still there, still watching. Tengri in daily life. Tengri is influential not only in major events, but also in daily life. The ancient Turks would look up at the sky every morning when they woke up, and they would silently give thanks. Tengri, you have given me life again today, thank you. Before eating, they would leave a piece on the ground, to earth water, or they would throw it into the fire, to Tengri. A small sacrifice, a sign of thanks. When setting out on a journey, they would look back 3 times, and they would say, Tengri, show me the way, protect me from my enemies, ensure my safe return. Before a battle, the Khan would pray to Tengri, and he would say, Tengri, grant me kut. Give my army strength. Ensure I defeat my enemies, let justice prevail. And after the battle, the victorious side would thank Tengri. They would sacrifice animals. They would hold feasts, because victory was a gift from Tengri. But the defeated side did not blame Tengri either. Instead, they would think, Tengri took my luck away. That means I am at fault. That means my enemy is more justified. This was an interesting logic, because winning meant being right, and being right meant having Tengri's support. So whoever had power was right, but this wasn't pure might makes right, because power wasn't just physical strength. Power was moral strength. It was strategic strength. It was social strength. And Tengri evaluated all these elements. A leader who was cruel could win in the short term, but in the long term, he would lose. Because cruelty alienated the people, and without the people, the leader was powerless, and without power, Tengri's favor would be lost. This logic ensured stability in ancient Turkish societies, because leaders had to be not only strong, but also fair. Tengri and time. The nature of Tengri is also related to time because Tengri is eternal. Tengri is outside of time. Or perhaps time is within Tengri. Both could be true. Ancient Turks viewed time as cyclical seasons turn, years turn, life turns, Everything like a circle. The beginning and the end meet at the same point. Spring comes. Flowers bloom, animals are born. Then summer, hot days, plenty of food. Then autumn, harvest time, preparation time. Then winter, cold, darkness, time of death. But winter is not the end, because after winter, spring comes again. The cycle continues, forever. Human life is like this too. Birth, childhood, youth, maturity, old age, death, and then rebirth. Perhaps not in the same body. But the spirit continues. It returns to Tengri, and is sent forth again. This belief is not reincarnation in the Buddhist sense. The ancient Turks did not develop a specific doctrine of reincarnation, but they believed in the immortality of the soul and that the soul had a connection with Tengri. So, what happens when a person dies? The soul leaves the body, and it embarks on a journey. This journey is dangerous, because Erlik's demons try to capture the soul. They want to take the soul to Tamag. But if a person's soul is pure, if they have lived a good life, Tengri protects them. He elevates their souls to his realm. There they live in peace forever. Or perhaps they become a part of Tengri. They merge with the sky. Funeral rites were performed to facilitate this journey. The ancient Turks buried their dead, or in some regions they burned them and turned them to ashes. In both cases, the goal was the same: to set the soul free. The deceased was buried with their valuables, their horse, their weapons, their jewelry. Because these items would be useful in the other world. The spirit should not go to the other world empty-handed. During the funeral, the shaman performed certain rituals. He guided the spirit. Go, ascend towards Tengri. Do not look down. Do not listen to Erlik. Follow the light. And the community would mourn. They would cry. They would sing songs. But excessive mourning was frowned upon, because excessive mourning would pull the spirit back. Seeing the tears of its loved ones, the spirit would want to return, and this would put the spirit in danger. Therefore, mourning had to be brief and controlled. Perhaps a few days, perhaps a week, but then life had to continue where it left off, because life was a gift to us from Tengri, and to waste this gift would be disrespectful to him. Tengri and the rulers. Tengri affected not only ordinary people but also rulers. In fact, rulers had a special connection with Tengri, because they were Tengri's representatives on earth. Ancient Turkish rulers bore the title, the person chosen by Tengri. Tengri Khan, or son of Tengri. This gave them legitimacy. The people saw the ruler not only as a leader, but as a sacred figure. However, this sacredness was not guaranteed. As mentioned earlier, the concept of kut could be lost. If a ruler governed poorly, Tengri would take the kut back from him, and the ruler would be deposed. History is full of such examples. A Khan becomes cruel. He oppresses the people. He acts greedily, and the people revolt. They overthrow the Khan, and they choose a new leader for themselves. This was Tengri's justice because Tengri never loved the cruel. Tengri was on the side of justice, and justice sometimes required revolution. But of course, not every uprising was enough to overthrow the ruler. Some rulers were powerful. They kept their armies under control, and they suppressed the uprisings. So, where was Tengri in this situation? The ancient Turks said, Tengri is patient. Tengri does not rush. A ruler may harm his people for a lifetime, but in the end he will be punished. Perhaps the ruler will be killed by one of his children. Perhaps he will die of illness. Perhaps he will be defeated by his enemies. In any case, Tengri's justice will prevail. Perhaps in this world, perhaps in the next, but it will prevail. Famous rulers and Tengri. Throughout history, there have been many rulers known for their belief in Tengri. For example, Bilge Khan. His famous Orkhon inscriptions refer to Tengri many times. Above is Tengri, below is Yersu. Both made me Khan, says the inscription. This emphasizes Bilge Khan's legitimacy. He was chosen not by the people, but by Tengri. But the same inscription also reminds us of Bilge Khan's responsibilities. I made my people strong, I made the poor rich. I made the little into much. This is not boasting. This is giving an account to Tengri. Look, Tengri, I used the kut you gave me well. Another example is Mete Khan, the great ruler of the Huns. Mete Khan had great respect for Tengri. Before every battle, he would look up at the sky, and he would pray silently, Tengri, give me the power to defeat my enemies. And Khan Mete won great victories. He brought China to its knees. He united Central Asia. He established a vast empire. And after every victory, he was grateful to Tengri. He offered sacrifices. He held feasts. But Khan Met never became arrogant. He never said, I am the supreme ruler. No, he always said, there is no one greater than Tengri. I am only his whip on earth. This humility is at the core of the Tengri faith, because arrogance leads to downfall, like Erlik's downfall. But humility leads to rise, like Tengri's rise. Tengri and war was part of ancient Turkish life. Nomadic societies were constantly on the move. And movement meant conflict, for land, for resources, for survival. But war was not just a physical event. War was also spiritual. Because in war, Tengri's justice was revealed. The ancient Turks made extensive preparations before going to war. Not just military preparations, but spiritual ones too. The shaman performed rituals. He cleansed the warriors' spirits. He protected them. Each warrior carried a special talisman, perhaps a piece of bone, perhaps a stone, perhaps an animal tail. These talismans symbolized Tengri's protection. On the battlefield, the Khan would address the army, and he would say, Tengri is on our side. Our enemies are unjust. We are righteous. Tengri will grant us victory. And the army would shout in unison, Tengri, Tengri, Tengri. This was not just a morale booster, it was a belief, a true belief. If Tengri was with them, they would not lose. If Tengri was against them, they could not win, and the battle would begin. Arrows would rain down from the sky. Swords clashed. Blood was spilled, and Tengra watched everything unfold from above. When victory came, the ancient Turks saw it as Tengri's blessing. They sacrificed animals, horses, sheep, sometimes even prisoners. Blood was offered to Tengri as a sign of gratitude. But when defeat came, it was seen as Tengri's punishment. The people, the leader, the army had made a mistake, and Tengri punished that mistake. This belief strengthened the warrior spirit of the ancient Turks, because war was not only a physical struggle but also a moral one, and to win required not only strength but also righteousness. Tengra and the family Tengri played a role not only in major events but also in family life. Marriage, birth, death, all were under Tengri's supervision. Marriage was a special event because marriage united two souls, and souls came from Tengri. Therefore, marriage was a covenant before Tengri. The ancient Turks called on a shaman during marriage ceremonies. The shaman blessed the couple and said, Tengri, unite these two souls. Give them children, protect them. May their path be peaceful. The couple prayed to Tengri, and the community bore witness. Marriage was not a special agreement. It was a sacred agreement. Birth was an even more special event. because birth was the beginning of a new life, and life was Tengri's greatest gift. When a child was born, the family would thank Tengri. They would sacrifice a small animal, a sheep, a chicken, and the shaman would bless the child. The shaman would draw a sign on the child's forehead, with ash or with blood. This sign symbolized Tengri's protection. This child is under Tengri's watch. Evil spirits, stay away from him. The child's first word was usually mother or father, but in some families the first word was Tengri. The child must know Tengri from a young age. The child must respect Tengri. As the child grew, stories about Tengri were told to him. Tengri's greatness, Tengri's justice, Tengri's power. And the child listened to these stories. Their eyes would shine, and they would dream about Tengri. Maybe one day they too would become a great warrior. Maybe one day they too would receive Tengri's blessing. Maybe one day they too would ascend to the sky. Tengri and Art Tengri also inspired art. Ancient Turkish art is filled with the influence of Tengri. Music, for example. The ancient Turks played various musical instruments. The kopuz was one of the most famous simple two-stringed instrument, but in the right hands it caressed the soul. The songs played on the kopuz usually praised Tengri, or nature or love. In any case, a piece of Tengri's spirit was present. How vast is the sky? How deep is the sea? How powerful is Tengri? How small are we? Simple words, but deep meanings. Ancient Turkish poetry was not ostentatious, but it was concise. Every word carried meaning. Dance was also dedicated to Tengri. The dances of the shamans were ritualistic dances, but ordinary people also danced, especially at feasts. The dances were usually circular because the circle symbolized infinity, Tengri's eternity, the cycle of life. People would hold hands and turn and turn and turn, for hours until they were exhausted, and even when they were exhausted, they were happy, because dance was a form of worship. It was a way to get closer to Tengri. Visual arts were more limited. As ancient Turks were nomadic, they could not carry heavy works of art with them. But still, some art forms had developed, for example, carpet weaving. Carpets were not only practical, but also artistic. The patterns symbolized Tengri. Blue represented the sky. White represented purity. Red represented life. Jewelry making had also developed. Gold and silver jewelry was decorated with Tengri motifs. The sun, moon, stars. These were symbols of Tengri and stone carving. Tombstones, balbals, inscriptions. These were monuments dedicated to Tengri. This is the home of a person who lived by the grace of Tengri. Art was not entertainment, for the ancient Turks' art was a form of expression. It was a way to honor Tengri, and that is why art was always done with deep respect. Tengri and Nature. The ancient Turks lived in harmony with nature, but this was not an environmentalist movement in the modern sense. It was more a result of the Tengri faith. Because ancient nature was the work of Tengri, the mountains were created by Tengri. The rivers flowed by Tengri. Animals had been given life by Tengri. Therefore, harming nature was a great disrespect to Tengri. The ancient Turks hunted only what they needed. When a deer was hunted, thanks were given, both to the deer and to Tengri. Thank you for giving us your life. Nothing was wasted. All the meat was eaten. The skin was used to make clothing. The bones were used to make tools. No part went to waste. Because waste was an insult to Tengri, trees were cut down carefully. Trees were not cut down unnecessarily. Because trees were alive, they had spirits, and hurting their spirits was worse. Water was not polluted. No filth was dumped into the river. Water was life. And polluting life was polluting Tengri. This approach enabled the ancient Turks to establish a sustainable relationship with the environment. They did not consume nature. They lived with it. And this was Tengri's will. Tengri and life after death. We briefly touched on life after death earlier, but now let's look at it in more detail, because the afterlife is a central part of the Tengri faith. According to the ancient Turks, death is not the end. Death is a transition from physical life to spiritual life. When a person dies, their soul leaves their body. But the soul does not immediately go to Tengri or Erlik first. It remains in this world for a while. Perhaps a few days, perhaps a few weeks. During this time, the soul visits its loved ones. It sees them, but they cannot see the soul. The soul silently says goodbye, and then it sets out on its journey. The journey is dangerous because there are two paths, upward to Tengri or downward to Erlik, and the soul cannot choose which one to take. Its life has determined that. If the person has lived a good life, the soul is drawn upward. An invisible force lifts it up, toward the blue sky among the clouds, among the stars, and the soul reaches Tengri's realm. There is eternal peace. There is no pain. There is no fear, only tranquility. Eternal tranquility. In Tengri's realm, the soul meets other souls, ancestors, heroes, loved ones. Together, they live in Tengri's peace. But if a person has lived a bad life, the soul is pulled down, towards darkness, under the earth, to Tamag. In Tamag, as we mentioned before, there is punishment, there is pain, there is regret, but there is no hope. Does the soul remain in Tamag forever? Some legends say yes, some say no. Some say that after the soul has served its punishment, it is returned to Tengri. It is given another chance. But this much is certain. Life after death is as important as life itself. And how you live your life determines where you will be after death. Tengri's relationship with other gods. Was Tengri the only god? This is a complex question, because ancient Turkic belief was neither monotheistic nor polytheistic. It contained elements of both. Tengri was the supreme being, the most powerful, the most sacred. But there were other beings too, spirits, gods, goddesses, and all of them were subordinate to Tengri. For example, Umay Ana, a goddess, the protector of fertility, motherhood, and children. Umay Ana was a much-loved figure because children were the future of society. And Umay Ana protected children. Ancient Turkic women prayed to Umay Ana when giving birth. Umay Ana, give me strength. Let me give birth to my child healthy. Protect me and my baby. And Mother Umay heard their prayers, most of the time. But sometimes she did not answer, and the baby was stillborn, or the mother died. In this case, the community would say, Mother Umay did not answer. Perhaps Erlik interfered. Perhaps it was fate. Mother Umay was not independent of Tengri. She was seen as a reflection of Tengri, a kind of intermediary, a being who applied Tengri's power in a specific area. Another figure, Yersu, earth water, the spirit of the material world. Yersu was alive. It breathed, it felt, and it interacted with people. The ancient Turks respected Yersu. When they sowed the soil, they prayed to Yersu. Yersu, accept my seeds, grow them, give us food. Before drinking water, they thanked Yersu. Yersu, you gave us water. You gave us life. Thank you. Earth water was also under Tengri. Tengri ruled the sky. Earth water ruled the earth together. They maintained balance. And there were other beings. The spirit of fire, the spirit of wind, mountain spirits, river spirits, forest spirits. Each had its own unique character. Some were friendly, some were hostile, some were helpful, some were mischievous, but all were Tengri's creations. All had a place in Tengri's universe, and all obeyed Tengri's rules, the spread of the Tengri faith. The Tengri faith spread from Central Asia to the world. As the nomadic Turkic tribes moved, they carried their beliefs with them. To the west, to Anatolia, to the east, to Mongolia, to the north, to Siberia, to the south, to Iran, to India. Tengri belief reached everywhere. But everywhere it changed a little. Because it mixed with local cultures, it encountered local gods, and new forms emerged. For example, among the Mongols, the Tengri faith blended with Buddhism. The word Tengri retained its meaning of sky. But Buddhist elements were added: karma, reincarnation, nirvana. These were integrated into the Tengri faith. In Anatolia, the Tengri belief encountered Islam, and over time, Islam became dominant. But Tengri was not completely forgotten. Among the people, some practices continued. For example, the blue bead, the evil eye bead. This is an ancient Tengri symbol. Blue represents the sky. Tengri, protection, protection from the evil eye, or the tradition of planting trees. In Islam, planting trees is not a specific act of worship, but in Anatolia, planting trees is considered sacred, because in the ancient Tengri belief, trees were sacred, or respect for mountains. In Islam, mountains are not special, but in Anatolia, some mountains are still considered sacred, because in the ancient Tengri belief, mountains were the home of Tengri. So Tengri did not disappear completely. He transformed, he changed shape. And even today, in some traditions, you can see traces of Tengri. Tengri and the modern era. How is the Tengri faith viewed today? This varies from region to region. In Central Asia, especially in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Mongolia, the Tengri faith is experiencing a revival. People are returning to their roots. They are reconnecting with their ancient traditions. Some communities are building Tengri temples, modern temples, but using ancient motifs, blue colors, sky symbols, drums, shamanic clothing. People gather in these temples. They pray. They perform rituals, but in a modern style. They broadcast live on the internet. They share on social media. Tengri is adapting to the modern era. In Turkey, the situation is a bit different. Turkey is a secular republic, but the majority of the population is Muslim. The Tengri faith is marginal. But there is interest, especially in nationalist circles. Some groups see the Tengri faith as part of the essence of Turkish identity, pre-Ataturk, pre-Islam, pure Turkish identity. And Tengri is the symbol of this identity. The Tengri faith inspires some people. Freedom, nature, justice. These are Tengri's values, and these are universal values. A contemporary view of Tengri. If someone asked you today, "Do you believe in Tengri?" how would you respond? This question is not easy, because Tengri, as a god, is not anthropomorphic. Tengri is the sky, infinity, time. What does it mean to believe in these? Perhaps believing in Tengri is more of a worldview, believing that the universe has an order, believing that justice will ultimately prevail, believing that nature is sacred. In this sense, belief in Tengri can have meaning for everyone, regardless of religion, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, atheist. It doesn't matter, because Tengri is not a dogma. Tengri is a way of being. This is the legacy left by the ancient Turks, a belief system, yes, but also a way of life and a philosophy, being in harmony with nature, pursuing justice, being humble, being courageous, being generous. These are the teachings of Tengri, and they are still valid. Today, tomorrow, forever. Tengri and philosophical thought. The Tengri faith is also rich philosophically because Tengri is not just a god, but also a concept. The concept of infinity, the concept of justice, the concept of balance. Infinity. Tengri is without beginning and infinite. This is a thought about the nature of time. Time may be linear in human perception, but on a universal scale, it may be cyclical. Perhaps time has no beginning and no end. Tengri represents this infinity. Justice. Tengri's justice is not mechanical. It is not like man-made laws. Tengri's justice is organic. It is natural. It is the balance of the universe itself. If you perform an action, consequences arise. Good action, good consequence. Bad action, bad consequence. But this may not happen immediately. It happens over time. This is similar to the concept of karma, but karma is Hindu philosophy. Tengri justice is Turkish philosophy. Although there are similarities between them, they are not the same thing. Balance. Tengri and Erlik symbolize balance, light and darkness, good and evil, creation and destruction. One is meaningless without the other. This is similar to the Taoist yin-yang, but again, it is not the same. The Tengri belief develops these concepts within its own cultural context, and this makes it philosophically interesting. Tengri and the psychological dimension. The Tengri belief also fulfilled a psychological need. People seek meaning. They seek purpose. And Tengri provided that meaning. What would a nomad think, alone on the steppes under the endless sky? Perhaps, who am I? Why am I here? What is the meaning of life? And Tengri would answer, silently, with the blue sky. You are a part of me. You are a part of creation. Your purpose is to live well, to be brave, to be fair, and ultimately, to return to me. This answer is simple but satisfying. It gives a person a place, it gives a purpose, and it gives hope. Hope. Death is not the end. Life continues. The soul returns to Tengri, or it takes on another form. Either way, you do not cease to exist. This comforted people. It lessened the fear of death. Belonging. Belief in Tengri strengthened the bonds between members of the community because everyone lived under the same blue sky. Everyone was a child into whom Tengri had breathed a soul. This created a sense of belonging responsibility. Tengri watched. Tengri knew. Therefore, you could not commit a crime, because Tengri would see it. This provided a moral control mechanism, Tengri and ecological awareness. Today, environmental issues are a major cause for concern. Climate change, deforestation, ocean pollution. And people are searching for solutions. Perhaps the Tengri faith can offer a solution. Because the Tengri faith views nature as sacred. It sees nature as Tengri's creation. And harming nature is disrespectful to Tengri. If people embraced this value, they would treat the environment differently. Before cutting down forests, they would think, this tree is alive. It has a spirit. Do I really need to cut it down? Before dumping plastic into the oceans, they would think, this water is life. Polluting it is polluting life. I shouldn't do this. Of course, the Tengri faith alone cannot solve environmental problems, but it can bring about a change in perspective. And sometimes a change in perspective is the most important step. Final thoughts on Tengri. Tengri is a complex figure, a god, a concept, a symbol, all at once. The ancient Turks' belief in Tengri began thousands of years ago, and over time it evolved. It changed, it transformed, but it never completely disappeared. Today, Tengri still lives on, perhaps not in its original form, but traces of it can be seen in traditions, language, and culture. And perhaps Tengri's message is still relevant: respect for nature, the pursuit of justice, humility, courage. These are universal values, and these are the legacy Tengri has left us. The sky is still blue. It still seems infinite. And every morning the sun rises again. Every night the stars shine again. Tengri is still there. Perhaps we no longer call him by that name. Perhaps the rituals are no longer performed. But the sky is still there, and the sky is still watching. Tengri's silence and meaning. One of Tengri's deepest characteristics is his silence. In modern religions, gods speak. They send books, they send prophets, they perform miracles. But Tengri does none of these things. Tengri is silent. This silence is not emptiness. On the contrary, this silence is fullness. Because everything is Tengri's language, the winds blowing across the steppe, the rain pouring from the blue sky as if from a bucket, the thunder, the howl of an alpha wolf, the last breath of a dying person. Each was Tengri's language on earth. The ancient Turks knew how to read this language. If a bird flew from the left, it carried meaning. If it flew from the right, it meant something else. If a wolf howled at night, one had to be careful. If it was seen during the day, one had to be even more careful. The shape of the clouds carried messages. If a cloud looked like a horse, it was time to travel. If it looked like a wolf, war was near. If it looked like a human face, the ancestors were telling us something. But this was not superstition. Or at least it wasn't for the ancient Turks. For them, this world was a book, and Tengri was the writer. Everything that existed was a word, a sentence, a paragraph. And if you read carefully, you understood the message. Modern people have forgotten this language. They no longer look at the clouds. They no longer listen to the birds. They no longer feel the wind on their cheeks. Their eyes are glued to screens. Their ears are plugged with headphones. And the world, like an unread book, flows silently by. Perhaps Tengri is still speaking, but no one is listening. Tengri and the individual journey, every person had their own journey with Tengri, because every person was different, different talents, different weaknesses, different destinies. Some people were born warriors, brave, strong, fast. Their path was the path of the sword, to face enemies on the battlefield, to write Tengri's justice in blood. Some people were born shamans, sensitive, intuitive, spiritual. Their path was the path of transition, to travel between invisible worlds, to convey Tengri's messages to the people. Some people were born as shepherds, patient, gentle, responsible. Their path was the path of the herd, to protect the animals, to live in harmony with nature, to be grateful for Tengri's gifts, and every path was equally valuable, because every path led them to Tengri, the warrior with courage, the shaman with wisdom, the shepherd with humility, but they all served the same purpose. We said there was no caste system in ancient Turkish society. Therefore, a shepherd's child could become a Khan, if he had the talent, if Tengri's favor was upon him, if he possessed Kut. This allowed for social mobility, but it also created pressure. Because failure was not an excuse. You couldn't say, Tengri didn't give you a chance, because Tengri gave everyone a chance. Only some used that chance. Some did not. Tengri and the concept of destiny. The ancient Turks' concept of destiny was interesting, because it was both fatalistic and libertarian, both at the same time. On the one hand, there was destiny. A person was born at a certain time, into a certain family, to a certain place. These things could not be changed. These were Tengri's decisions, and some major events were predetermined by fate. A person would die at a certain age. They would marry a certain person. They would take part in a certain war. These were written in Tengri's book. But on the other hand, there was free will. A person decided for themselves how they would live. Would they be good or bad? Will he be brave or cowardly? Will he be generous or stingy? These were the person's own choices, and these choices could affect his destiny. For example, if it was written that a person would die young, but he lived a very good life, Tengri could forgive him, and he could extend his life. Or if a person was destined to live a long life, but lived a bad life, Tengri could punish them. He could shorten their life. So, destiny was not fixed. It was flexible, variable, and people could influence their destiny with their choices, with their actions, with their intentions. This belief gave hope to the ancient Turks, because not everything was predetermined. Not everything was certain. There was still a chance to fight. There was still a chance to change. Tengri and social order. The Tengri belief also shaped social order, because Tengri represented justice, and justice was the foundation of society. In ancient Turkish societies, there were laws, but these laws did not come from the whims of kings. The laws reflected Tengri's justice, or at least that was how it should have been. For example, theft was a crime, because theft was stealing someone else's labor, and labor was a gift from Tengri. Therefore, theft was a great disrespect to Tengri. Murder was an even greater crime, because murder was stealing the life given by Tengri, and life was the greatest gift to us. Therefore, murder was the greatest disrespect, but the punishments were proportional. A thief did not lose his hand, in the modern sense. Instead, he had to pay back multiples of what he stole. If he stole a sheep, he would return 5 sheep. If he couldn't pay, he would be enslaved until the debt was paid off. A murderer was punished with death. But sometimes the family could forgive, by paying blood money. This was a different form of justice, because justice was not just punishment. Justice was about establishing balance. In society, everyone had their place. Everyone had a role. Leaders led, warriors fought, shepherds herded sheep, women did housework, men did outside work, but these roles were not rigid. A woman could be a warrior. There are examples of this in history. A man could do housework. It was nothing to be ashamed of, because Tengri looked at results, not roles. Did you do a good job? Did you contribute to society? Did you act fairly? These things mattered. Your gender, status, age, all of these were secondary. Tengri and music, a deeper look. Let's talk a little more about music, because music held a central place in the Tengri faith. Music was not just entertainment. Music was a form of worship. Music was a means of communication. Shamans used music in rituals. The drum was the most important instrument. The rhythm of the drum mimicked the heartbeat. It started slowly, then it sped up, then it sped up even more, and this rhythm put the shaman into a trance. But the drum was not just an instrument. The drum was the shaman's horse. On spiritual journeys, the shaman rode the drum, and the drum carried him to the sky, to the underworld, to the realm of spirits. The kopuz, on the other hand, served a different purpose. The kopuz was used to tell stories. Bards would recite epics, stories of heroes, stories of wars, stories of love. And these stories were not just entertainment. They were history. They were culture. They were values, because there was no writing, or it was very limited. So, knowledge was passed down orally, through songs, through stories. A child would listen to these songs while growing up and learn. Who were our ancestors? What did they do? How did they live? What values did they believe in? It was all hidden in the songs. And when the child grew up, they would teach these songs to their own children. Thus, this would continue for generations, from generation to generation, from century to century. The language of music is universal. A song conveys emotions. Even if the words are not understood, the melody is understood. The rhythm is understood. And this was the language of Tengri, the universal language. Tengri and the deep analysis of dreams hold a very special place in the Tengri faith, because dreams are a door between the visible world and the invisible world. The ancient Turks saw sleep as a small death. When you slept, your body remained where it was, but your soul traveled. Where? To the land of dreams, or to the land of spirits, or to the past, or to the future. All were possible, and when you woke up, sometimes you remembered the dream, sometimes you forgot. But the dreams you remembered were important, because they were messages. Dream interpretation was an art. Anyone could do it. Shamans were experts, but older women were also usually good at interpreting them, because life experience gave them dream wisdom. Some dreams were clear. For example, if a person saw a deceased loved one in their dream, that was clear. An ancestor was sending a message, perhaps a warning, perhaps advice, perhaps just a visit. But some dreams were obscure. They were full of symbols. For example, if a person crossed a river in their dream, what did that mean? Perhaps a change is coming. Perhaps an obstacle will be overcome. Perhaps a journey will begin. Each is possible. And the interpreter must also evaluate the other symbols. Is the river water clear or murky? Is the current strong or calm? Did they reach the opposite bank, or did they get stuck in the middle? All these details would change the meaning, and sometimes dreams became prophecies. Will he be brave or cowardly? Will he be generous or stingy? These were the person's own choices, and these choices could affect his destiny. For example, if it was written that a person would die young, but he lived a very good life, Tengri could forgive him, and he could extend his life. Or if a person was destined to live a long life, but lived a bad life, Tengri could punish them. He could shorten their life. So destiny was not fixed. It was flexible, variable, and people could influence their destiny with their choices, with their actions, with their intentions. This belief gave hope to the ancient Turks, because not everything was predetermined. Not everything was certain. There was still a chance to fight. There was still a chance to change. Tengri and social order. The Tengri belief also shaped social order because Tengri represented justice, and justice was the foundation of society. In ancient Turkish societies, there were laws, but these laws did not come from the whims of kings. The laws reflected Tengri's justice, or at least that was how it should have been. For example, theft was a crime, because theft was stealing someone else's labor, and labor was a gift from Tengri. Therefore, theft was a great disrespect to Tengri. Murder was an even greater crime, because murder was stealing the life given by Tengri, and life was the greatest gift to us. Therefore, murder was the greatest disrespect, but the punishments were proportional. A thief did not lose his hand, in the modern sense. Instead, he had to pay back multiples of what he stole. If he stole a sheep, he would return 5 sheep. If he couldn't pay, he would be enslaved until the debt was paid off. A murderer was punished with death. But sometimes the family could forgive by paying blood money. This was a different form of justice, because justice was not just punishment. Justice was about establishing balance. In society, everyone had their place. Everyone had a role. Leaders led, warriors fought, shepherds herded sheep, women did housework, men did outside work. But these roles were not rigid. A woman could be a warrior. There are examples of this in history. A man could do housework. It was nothing to be ashamed of. Because Tengri looked at results, not roles. Did you do a good job? Did you contribute to society? Did you act fairly? These things mattered. Your gender, status, age, all of these were secondary. Tengri and music, a deeper look. Let's talk a little more about music, because music held a central place in the Tengri faith. Music was not just entertainment. Music was a form of worship. Music was a means of communication. Shamans used music in rituals. The drum was the most important instrument. The rhythm of the drum mimicked the heartbeat. It started slowly. Then it sped up. Then it sped up even more. And this rhythm put the shaman into a trance. But the drum was not just an instrument. The drum was the shaman's horse. On spiritual journeys, the shaman rode the drum, and the drum carried him to the sky, to the underworld, to the realm of spirits. The kopuz, on the other hand, served a different purpose. The kopuz was used to tell stories. Bards would recite epics, stories of heroes, stories of wars, stories of love. And these stories were not just entertainment. They were history. They were culture. They were values. Because there was no writing, or it was very limited. So, knowledge was passed down orally, through songs, through stories. A child would listen to these songs while growing up and learn. Who were our ancestors? What did they do? How did they live? What values did they believe in? It was all hidden in the songs. And when the child grew up, they would teach these songs to their own children. Thus, this would continue for generations, from generation to generation, from century to century. The language of music is universal. A song conveys emotions. Even if the words are not understood, the melody is understood. The rhythm is understood. And this was the language of Tengri. The universal language, Tengri and the deep analysis of dreams. Dreams hold a very special place in the Tengri faith, because dreams are a door between the visible world and the invisible world. The ancient Turks saw sleep as a small death. When you slept, your body remained where it was, but your soul traveled. Where? To the land of dreams, or to the land of spirits, or to the past, or to the future. All were possible. And when you woke up, sometimes you remembered the dream, sometimes you forgot. But the dreams you remembered were important, because they were messages. Dream interpretation was an art. Anyone could do it. Shamans were experts, but older women were also usually good at interpreting them, because life experience gave them dream wisdom. Some dreams were clear. For example, if a person saw a deceased loved one in their dream, that was clear. An ancestor was sending a message, perhaps a warning, perhaps advice, perhaps just a visit. But some dreams were obscure. They were full of symbols. For example, if a person crossed a river in their dream, what did that mean? Perhaps a change is coming. Perhaps an obstacle will be overcome. Perhaps a journey will begin. Each is possible. And the interpreter must also evaluate the other symbols. Is the river water clear or murky? Is the current strong or calm? Did they reach the opposite bank, or did they get stuck in the middle? All these details would change the meaning. And sometimes dreams became prophecies, Tengri and animal guides. In the Tengri faith, animals were not merely living creatures. Animals were spiritual guides. Every animal had a message. It had a lesson. The wolf taught courage and loyalty. Wolves hunted in packs. Together they were strong, but they could also stand alone. The wolf was a creature of the night. It could see in the dark. It overcame fear, and it fought to the end. A warrior should be like a wolf, brave, loyal, resilient, and ready to give his life for his community. The eagle taught freedom and greatness. The eagle flies highest. It soars over mountain peaks. It touches the clouds. The eagle sees sharply. It picks its prey from afar and catches it with a sudden swoop. A leader should be like an eagle, visionary, seeing far ahead, setting high goals, and acting decisively when the time comes. The horse taught freedom and power. The horse is the child of the steppes. It runs like the wind. It never stops. It never tires. The horse is man's friend. He rides it, travels with it. Without the horse, the Turk could not be a nomad. A nomad should be like a horse, free, fast, strong, and always ready for the journey. The fox taught intelligence and cunning. The fox is small, it is weak, but it survives. Because it is smart. It sees traps, it avoids danger, and when it finds an opportunity, it seizes it. A diplomat should be like a fox, smart, gentle, but always careful, and capable of protecting its own interests. The bear taught strength and protection. The bear is large, it is strong, but it is not aggressive. If not disturbed, it does no harm, but when protecting its family, it is terrifying. Nothing can separate a mother bear from her cub. A parent should be like a bear, protective, strong, and capable of doing anything for their children. And there were many other animals: the deer, the snake, the owl, the fish. Each had a lesson. Each had a message. And the ancient Turks observed these animals. They learned from them, and they heard the voice of Tengri within them. Tengri and the cycle of the seasons. The seasons were Tengri's breath. Spring was rebirth. Summer was the peak of life. Autumn was ripening. Winter was death and rest. But death was not the end, because after winter, spring would come again. The cycle was endless, just like life, just like the spirit. When spring came, the ancient Turks celebrated Navruz, the new day, March 21st. Day and night were of equal length. Balance and harmony embraced each other. On Nevruz Day, cleaning was done. New clothes were worn, fires were lit, and people jumped over the fire. They did this to leave the evils of the past year behind in the fire. Nevruz was not just a celebration. Nevruz was a renewal. It was a beginning. Tengri was recreating the world, and people were participating in this creation. When summer came, it was a time of abundance. The grass grew green. The animals fattened up. Milk flowed freely. Meat was eaten in abundance, and people were happy. Because Tengri had been generous. He had shown his favor. But summer was also a time of work. The animals had to be herded. Milk had to be milked. Cheese had to be made. Preparations for winter had to begin, because summer did not last forever. When autumn came, it was harvest time. The Turks, who farmed to a small extent, gathered their crops. The animals were prepared for winter. Some were slaughtered. Their meat was dried. Their hides were processed. Autumn was also a time for reflection. How had the year gone? What had been done? What had not been done? How faithful had they been to Tengri? These questions were asked, and answers were sought. When winter came, it was a time for rest. Snow fell. It was cold. It was difficult to go outside. People stayed in their tents. They gathered around the fire. They told stories. They sang songs. Winter was also a time of death. The elderly often died in winter. Children fell ill in winter. Animals starved to death in winter. Winter was Erlik's time, but it was also Tengri's test. If you survived the winter, you reached spring. If you couldn't survive the winter, Erlik would take you. This was natural selection. The strong survived, the weak perished. But this wasn't cruel, this was Tengri's order, because nature demanded balance, and balance sometimes required loss. Tengri and migration, life in motion. Nomadism was the essence of the Tengri faith, because nomadism was freedom. To remain stationary was to be imprisoned, but to move was to live. The ancient Turks migrated several times a year. In spring, they went to the summer pastures, to the mountains, to the high plateaus. There, the air is cool, the grass is fresh. It is ideal for animals. In autumn, they returned to the winter pastures, to the valleys, to sheltered places. There, the wind is less, the cold is less felt. It is easier to survive the winter. The migration was not easy, especially for children, the elderly, and pregnant women. But everyone participated, because migration was a community activity. Everyone played a role. The men herded the animals, horses, sheep, goats, camels. All had to be kept in order. Nothing could be lost. The women gathered the belongings. They took down the tents. They packed everything. They loaded the camels. Everything had to be organized, because during the migration, if something was forgotten, there was no turning back. Children did small tasks. They carried water. They gathered wood. They cleaned animal waste. They, too, had to contribute to the community. The elders gave advice. Don't take this path. It's dangerous. Take that path. It's safe. Set up camp here. There's water. Don't set up there. There are predators. And the migration would take days, sometimes weeks, slowly, step by step. There was no rushing, because rushing meant mistakes, and mistakes meant death. During the migration, prayers were offered to Tengri. Tengri, show us the way. Protect us from danger. Ensure we arrive safely. And usually, Tengri listened. The community arrived safely, to new pastures, to new living areas, and there they settled again. Tents were set up, animals were released, life went on. But sometimes Tengri did not listen, or perhaps Erlik interfered. Storms arose, floods occurred, animals would be lost, people would die. In such cases, the community would say, Tengri has a reason. Perhaps we made a mistake. Perhaps our leader made the wrong decision. Perhaps we lost our cut. And the leader would take responsibility, or be forced to take responsibility, because in a nomadic society, leadership was not a privilege, but a responsibility. Tengri and character building. The Tengri faith also placed great importance on character building, because character was the essence of a person. Appearance was not important. Wealth was not important. But character was everything. What was a good character? According to the ancient Turks, a good character had several fundamental values. First, courage, but not blind courage. Intelligent courage. See the danger, assess it, then decide. If you must fight, fight. If you must flee, flee. But in any case, you must overcome your fear. Fear is natural. Everyone fears. But the brave are those who act despite their fear. That is true courage. Second, honesty. Don't lie. Don't deceive. Don't cheat. because these are signs of weakness. The strong speak the truth. They accept the consequences, but honesty is not rudeness. Speak the truth, but kindly. Don't hurt, but don't hide either. Strike a balance. Third, generosity. No matter how rich you are, share, because wealth is a gift from Tengri. And to hide a gift is ingratitude. Hospitality was very important to the ancient Turks. If a stranger comes to your tent, accept him. Feed him. Give him drink. Give him a place to sleep. Ask no questions, because he is Tengri's guest, and Tengri's guest is your guest. Fourth, humility. No matter how great you are, do not boast of greatness, because greatness is a gift from Tengri. It is not your achievement. Mite Khan was one of the most powerful Khans, but he never said, "I am great." He always said, "Tengri is great. I am only his servant." Fifth, patience. Do not rush. Wait for the right time, because everything has its time, and Tengri controls time. Patience is not passivity. Patience is strategic waiting. It is watching for the opportunity. And when the opportunity comes, it is acting swiftly and decisively. A person possessing these values would be an Urar. Does not only mean male, means a mature person, a person of character, a respectable person. And in ancient Turkish society, the greatest honor was to be an Urar. It was more valuable than wealth, more valuable than power, because wealth can be lost, power can diminish, but character lasts forever. Tengri and social solidarity. Nomadic life was difficult. Nature was harsh. There were many enemies. Surviving alone was almost impossible. That is why solidarity was essential. In ancient Turkish societies, the community was everything. The individual was part of the community, and the community was the individual's responsibility. If someone's tent collapsed, everyone would help. They would rebuild it. If someone's animals went missing, everyone would search until they were found. If someone fell ill, everyone would care for them. Food would be brought. Medicine would be made. Prayers would be said. They would not be left alone, because tomorrow you could be sick. Your tent could collapse. Your animals could go missing. And then the community would help you. This was a system of mutual benefit, but it was also a moral system. Because Tengri loved solidarity, he did not love selfishness. In the community, everyone had a role, and everyone's role was valuable. The Khan provided leadership, but without the Khan, the warriors could not fight. Without warriors, the herders couldn't be protected. Without herders, the community couldn't find food. Everything was connected. Everything was a chain, and the chain was only as strong as its weakest link. That's why strengthening the weak link was everyone's job. If someone was inadequate, train them. If someone was slow, wait patiently. If someone made a mistake, forgive them. But teach them, because a community is not made up of perfect people. A community is made up of flawed people. But together they can approach perfection. And Tengri does not expect perfection. Tengri expects effort. He expects good intentions. He expects sincerity. Tengri and aging. Aging was honorable among the ancient Turks because aging meant surviving for many years, and surviving meant Tengri's blessing. The elderly were the community's treasure because they carried knowledge, they carried experience, they carried stories. They were the past, and the past was necessary to understand the future. When a decision had to be made, the elders were consulted. What should we do? War or peace? Migration or stay? The elders would think. They would remember. 100 years ago, there was a similar situation, At that time, our ancestors did this, and this was the result. This knowledge was invaluable, because history repeats itself, and those who knew history could shape the future. But old age was also difficult. The body weakens, eyesight weakens, ears become hard of hearing, movement becomes difficult. In a nomadic life, this was a major handicap, because migration required physical strength, and the elders had lost that strength. In some communities, the elderly were left behind during migration, left behind, alone, abandoned to death. This seems cruel, but according to the ancient Turks, it was mercy, because if the elderly could no longer contribute to society, they became a burden, and being a burden was humiliating. Some elderly people accepted this willingly. Leave me. Go. It is time for me to return to Tengri. And the community accepted this with tears. They would leave the elderly person in a comfortable place. They would leave some food. They would leave some water. And they would say goodbye. The elderly person would sit there alone, looking up at the sky. And they would take their last breath. Their soul would ascend to Tengri, into Tengri's arms. This is contrary to modern morality, but according to the ancient Turks, it was natural. It was part of life. And Tengri understood this. He forgave it. Tengri and the warrior spirit war was an inevitable part of ancient Turkish life. But war was not only physical. War was spiritual. A warrior does not only know how to use a sword, a warrior knows how to overcome fear. A warrior accepts death. Because in war, death can come at any moment. An arrow, a sword, a spear, and the body falls. But the spirit rises to Tengri. To die in battle is honorable, because you fought for your community. You died for something worth dying for. And Tengri sees this. He rewards you. Ancient Turkish warriors prepared before battle, not just physically, but spiritually. The shaman blessed them. He gave them talismans, and he told them, "Do not fear, for Tengri is with you. Do not fear death, for death is a new beginning. Be brave, be strong, and destroy your enemy." The warriors would internalize these words, and they would go to the battlefield. They would mount their horses. They would arm themselves, and the battle would begin. Chaos, noise, blood, screams. But the warrior would not hear these things, because the warrior was in a trance. He was focused. He had a target, and he was locked onto that target. He saw an enemy. He approached. He shot an arrow. The arrow found its target. The enemy fell. Next enemy, next arrow, next fall. The warrior worked like a machine, emotionless, ruthless, but also controlled. Because panic meant death, control meant life, and the battle ended. They either won or lost. But in either case, Tengri's will had been fulfilled. The victors gave thanks. The defeated felt remorse. But both accepted Tengri. Tengri and inner peace. Amidst all these wars, migrations, and hardships, how did the ancient Turks find inner peace? Answer, Tengri, because Tengri was always there, even if unseen, even if unheard, even if felt. Tengri was there, and this knowledge brought peace. An ancient Turk would look up at the night sky. Endless stars, endless blue, and he knew that Tengri was there, watching, protecting, and whatever happened, the outcome was in Tengri's hands. If he won, it was Tengri's blessing. If he lost, it was Tengri's punishment, or a test. Either way, there was meaning, there was a reason. Modern people have lost this understanding. Modern people want control. To control everything, to plan everything, to foresee everything. But life is uncontrollable. Life is chaotic. It is unpredictable. and this creates fear, it creates anxiety. But the ancient Turks did not experience this fear, because they left control to Tengri. Tengri knows. Tengri does. I just do what I can. The result is Tengri's. This was surrender, but not passive surrender, active surrender. I make an effort, but I accept the outcome. And this surrender brought peace, inner peace, deep peace, because there was no longer any need to worry, no longer any need to be anxious. Tengri would take care of everything. Tengri and interactive beliefs. The Tengri belief was not an isolated belief. Over time, it interacted with other beliefs, and these interactions created new syntheses. Shamanism was fundamental to the Tengri faith. But shamanism was not unique to the Turks. Similar practices existed in Siberia, Mongolia, and even among the Native Americans. Was this a coincidence, or was it a universal truth? Perhaps people everywhere had similar spiritual needs, and these needs gave rise to similar practices. When Buddhism arrived in Central Asia, it encountered the Tengri faith. At first, there was conflict, because Buddhism offered a different worldview: reincarnation, karma, nirvana. These did not exist in the Tengri faith, but over time a synthesis emerged. Tengri was incorporated into the Buddhist pantheon as a guardian deity or as a deva, and Buddhist concepts were integrated into the Tengri faith. For example, the concept of karma. The ancient Turks had a similar concept. You reap what you sow. But karma was more systematic. It was more detailed, and this detail was embraced by some Turks. Islam came later, from the 10th century onwards, and Islam was much more influential, because Islam was not just a belief. Islam was a civilization project. Law, art, science, literature, all together. When the ancient Turks embraced Islam, they abandoned the Tengri faith, officially. But unofficially, some practices continued. For example, the name Tengri was replaced by Allah. But the tradition of looking up at the sky continued. Looking up at the sky while praying, because Allah is in the sky, just like Tengri. Or when sacrificial animals are slaughtered, Bismillah is recited. But at the same time, the old Tengri prayer is whispered. Tengri, accept this sacrifice. The old and the new, intertwined. Or when a child is born, Islamic names are given. But at the same time, prayers are said to Umay Ana, secretly, without anyone seeing, because Umay Ana has not been forgotten. Christianity influenced some Turkic groups, especially Nestorianism. There were Nestorian churches in Central Asia, and some Turkic tribes became Christian. But they did not completely abandon Tengri either. Tengri was identified with the Christian God. Tengri and God are the same. This synthesis worked for a while. But then Islam came, and Christian Turks either converted to Islam or became marginalized. Today, there are very few Christian Turks, but they existed in history, and they preserved Tengri in their own way. The echo of Tengri today now, in the 21st century, does Tengri still exist? The answer is yes and no. No, because the original Tengri faith is no longer widespread. There are no temples. There are no priests. There is no organized religion. Yes, because traces of Tengri are still visible, in language, in culture, in traditions. The word gök means both sky and green dark blue, because the sky is blue, and blue is Tengri. The word kut is still used. Sacred, blessed, to celebrate. All come from the same root, and all express Tengri's grace. In traditions, the traces of Tengri are more obvious. Nowruz celebrations are still held, especially in Central Asia, Iran, Turkey. The tradition of lighting fires still exists at Hıdrellez at Kakava, dancing around the fire, jumping over the fire. These are ancient Tengri rituals. Respect for mountains still exists. In Turkey, some mountains are considered sacred. For example, Erciyes, Ağrı, Nemrut. People go to these mountains, they pray, they make wishes, or the tradition of tying cloth to trees. A tree, usually an old tree, is considered sacred. People tie pieces of cloth to it. They make wishes. This is a remnant of the ancient Tengri faith. So, Tengri is not dead. Tengri has transformed, changed form, adapted, and still, in some way, continues to exist. Tengri and personal search. Some people today are rediscovering Tengri, especially in Central Asia. In Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, these are usually young people, tired of Western civilization, of modern life, wanting to return to their roots, wanting to learn the faith of their ancestors. They read books, they do research, they listen to the elders, and they try to live Tengri in their own way. Some build temples, simple structures, made of natural materials, stone, wood, felt, and there they perform rituals. Some are trying to become shamans. They are learning to play the drum. They are learning to enter a trance. They are learning to embark on a spiritual journey. Some are simply embracing the philosophy, the values of Tengri, respect for nature, the pursuit of justice, humility, and they are trying to apply these values in their daily lives. This is called Neo-Tengrism, New Tengrism, the revival of the old faith in modern times. But there are also criticisms. Some say this is romanticism. The true Tengri faith was not like this. You are creating a nostalgic fantasy. Some say this is nationalism. You are using Tengri as a political tool against Islam, against the West. Both criticisms are somewhat true, but they are also unfair, because every religious revival involves some interpretation. Modern Christianity is not the Christianity of Jesus' time. Modern Islam is not the Islam of Muhammad's time. All have evolved, they have adapted. So, Neo-Tengrism can also evolve. It can adapt. And perhaps it can create something new. Neither completely old nor completely new. A synthesis of the two. Tengri's daily miracles. If Tengri could speak, what would he say? Maybe he would say this: "My child, don't worry. Everything is fine. Maybe you can't see it now. Maybe you don't understand now. But I see. I understand. And I am with you. Have you made mistakes? Yes, you have. Everyone does. But mistakes don't define you. Mistakes are opportunities to learn, apologize, make amends, and move on. Are you in pain? Yes, you are. Life hurts sometimes, but pain is temporary, and pain makes you stronger if you endure it. Are you alone? You're not. You're never alone. I am here, always, every time, everywhere, with you. Does the future scare you? Don't let it. The future is in my hands, and I want the best for you. Trust me. What should you do? Live well. Live honestly. Live courageously. Live generously. And be grateful every day for everything. And most importantly, remember, don't forget me. Don't forget to look at the sky. Don't forget to love nature. Don't forget to care about people. Because that is the meaning of life. Connections, relationships, love. Now, sleep, rest. Tomorrow is a new day, new opportunities, new beginnings. I will be with you, tomorrow, every day, forever. Good night, my child. May Tengri protect you. Now the words are coming to an end. The story has been told. The lessons have been taught. The messages have been delivered. Now only silence remains. And silence is enough. Because in silence, Tengri is heard most clearly. Are your eyes completely closed? Closed. Perfect. Is your body completely relaxed? Relaxed. Wonderful. Has your mind completely calmed down? It is calming down, slowly, wave after